Hey there, viewers. If someone came back from the brink of death with a message too horrifying to ignore, would you believe them? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Today's story is chilling. A 12-year-old victim died, returned, and revealed something terrifying about Diddy before taking her final breath. Let's get into it. Chapter 1. The Cold Room. I wake up, but it doesn't feel like waking up. It's cold. Not the kind of cold that makes you shiver, but the kind that sits in your bones, heavy, like something pressing down on me. My skin feels damp. My breath is slow. I try to move, but my body won't listen. My arms feel like they aren't even mine. My legs won't shift. I can't feel the ground beneath me. There's a light above me, flickering, casting long shadows against the walls. The ceiling looks gray, like a hospital, but something about it feels wrong. The air is thick, too thick, like it's filled with something I shouldn't be breathing in. It presses into my throat, making it hard to swallow. My head is pounding, a deep, slow throb, like something is swelling inside my skull. A sound rings in my ears, not loud but steady, like a soft hum. Underneath it I hear voices, muffled, distant, like they're coming from another room or another world. Some are talking low, too quiet to understand. Others are laughing. That sound makes my stomach twist, because I don't know why, but I don't think they should be laughing. I blink slowly and the room tilts. My vision is hazy, like I'm looking through water. The light flickers again, and for a second, I think I see something in the shadows, a shape standing there, watching me. I blink again, and it's gone. I try to lift my arm, and this time, it moves. Barely. My fingers twitch, my wrist jerks. My body feels wrong, like it's full of sand, like my skin is stretched too tight over something hollow. I try to speak, but no sound comes out. My lips are cracked, my tongue is heavy. Something is wrong. I don't know where I am. I don't know how I got here. I close my eyes, and flashes come, like tiny splinters of memory cutting through the fog. The penthouse. Music, deep and slow, pulsing through the walls. Laughter. The clinking of glasses. The sharp smell of alcohol mixed with something sweet. Perfume? No, something else. Something thicker, like cologne, like the scent of men leaning in too close, whispering things I didn't want to hear. Another flash. A glass in my hand. I don't remember picking it up. Someone holding my wrist, pressing the glass to my lips, tilting it. Just drink, a voice says, smooth and warm, like honey dripping over something rotten. I don't want to, but my throat is dry and the liquid is cool. Another flash, eyes watching me, a room too big, too expensive, filled with people who don't look at each other, only at what's in front of them. My skin crawling. A hand on my shoulder, my heart pounding, a strange heat washing over me, starting in my stomach, spreading out like wildfire. Then, nothing. The memory snaps shut like a door slamming in my face. I open my eyes again, gasping, but the air is still thick and wrong. My fingers dig into the cold floor beneath me. My nails scrape against something smooth, something unnatural. I push up, shaking, and force myself to sit. The room isn't big, the walls are bare, no windows, just a single mirror standing against the far wall. The light flickers again, and for the first time, I realize there's no door. I stare at the mirror. Something in me doesn't want to look. But I do, and what I see, my stomach drops. It's me, but it's not me. The girl in the mirror is pale, her skin dull and lifeless, her lips are dry, cracked open like she's been screaming. Her eyes are the worst part. They're hollow, sunken, bruised underneath like she hasn't slept in years. Her pupils are blown wide, black swallowing the color. I don't want to move, but my reflection does. She lifts her hand when I don't. Her lips part, but I don't feel them move. She whispers, but the words aren't mine. You were never meant to leave. A cold wave washes over me, like ice sinking into my spine. My breath catches in my throat. The girl in the mirror tilts her head, slow and unnatural, like something studying me from the other side. Her lips curl into a smile, but it's not a smile at all. I shove myself back, scrambling, but my arms give out. My back hits the floor hard. Then I hear it. My name, whispered, soft but close, right behind me. I whip around, heart slamming against my ribs. But there's nothing, just the flickering light, just the heavy air, No. I blink, and my breath catches in my throat. There, on the floor, a body, my body, lying still, motionless, eyes closed. I don't understand. I don't. My chest tightens. The pressure is back, heavier this time. My ears ring louder. My pulse stutters, skips, stops. I press my hands to my chest, but I can't feel my heartbeat. I can't. A rush of cold spreads through me, from my fingers to my toes. The light flickers again, and the shadows in the corners stretch, growing, shifting. The mirror cracks. I am not alive. The thought crashes into me, slamming through the last of the fog. I am not alive. I am not. A sound slices through the silence, not a whisper this time, not a voice, something else, something deep. A laugh. Low, rumbling. It's coming from the darkness, from everywhere, from nowhere. The air grows heavier, pressing against me, holding me down. My vision dims, my limbs go numb. The last thing I see before the darkness takes me is the mirror, shattered now, the reflection gone. But something else is looking back, and it's still smiling. Chapter 2. The night she lost herself. The cold room is disappearing. I don't know how, but it is. The walls aren't solid anymore. They ripple like water, the edges dissolving into a thick, shifting haze. The flickering light overhead sputters once, twice, then it vanishes. A deep blackness spreads, swallowing everything in its path, creeping toward my hands, my legs, my face. I try to push away from it, but the floor beneath me isn't solid anymore either. The cold tile melts into something else, something softer, something warm. Music. I hear music. It starts as a faint hum, barely there, but as the darkness swallows the last of the cold room, it grows louder, deeper, a slow, pulsing rhythm, a bass so thick I feel it in my ribs before I even realize I have ribs again. The darkness shifts, shapes begin to form. Gold light flickers through the haze, stretching into long, sharp beams. The air grows thick, heavy with perfume, sweat, the sharp tang of alcohol. And then voices, laughing, murmuring, the click of heels against polished floors. I know this place. I don't want to, but I do. The blackness peels away completely, and I'm standing in the middle of a room too big, too expensive, too perfect. The ceilings stretch impossibly high, draped with golden chandeliers, their crystals shimmering with light that seems too soft, too dim, like candle flames flickering behind frosted glass. Velvet couches, the color of deep wine, are arranged in elegant clusters, each one occupied by people who barely look at each other. Everyone is dressed in silk and gold. Everyone is beautiful in a way that feels forced, sculpted, unnatural. The walls breathe with whispers, soft, secret, dangerous. The party is alive, but not in a way that feels normal. There's something off about it, something too controlled, too calculated. The laughter is hollow, the smiles are sharp, the music is low, a steady, pulsing thrum that seems to guide the movement of every body in the room, swaying, slow and deliberate, like they're all dancing to a song only they can hear. I shouldn't be here. I feel it deep in my gut, curling under my ribs like something rotten. And yet, I am. I turn and there I am, my past self, younger, smaller, wrapped in a dress that doesn't feel like mine, fabric too tight, heels too high. My hair is styled in a way I don't recognize, sleek, smooth, unfamiliar. Someone had done it for me. Someone had decided how I would look tonight. I watch myself move through the room carefully, cautiously. I don't belong here and I know it. My shoulders are stiff, my hands curled into my sides, my eyes darting toward the people who pass too close. They don't see me, not really. They glance, they smirk. They look past me as if I'm nothing more than a decoration. But some do see me. Their gazes linger, their eyes rake over me, measuring, assessing. And then, a hand on my back. A voice, low, warm, familiar in a way that makes my skin crawl even before I turn to see him. A man I barely know, smiling too wide, too kind, telling me to relax, telling me to trust him. The memory pulls me forward like a current too strong to fight, and I am moving with it, no longer an observer but trapped inside it, reliving it, feeling every second as if it's happening now. The warm pressure of his hand guiding me through the room, the way he leans in close when he speaks, breath hot against my skin, the way I nod, not because I believe him, but because I don't know what else to do. The way I follow, the way I let him lead me, through the crowd, past the golden chandeliers, past the velvet couches and the whispers behind wine glasses, into the hallway. The noise fades as we walk, the party slipping away behind us, muffled, distant. The air changes, cooler, still a different kind of silence, thick with something unsaid. And then we stop. A door. Sleek, black, unmarked. He knocks once, low and deliberate. A pause. Then it opens. A man I don't recognize steps aside to let us in. He doesn't smile. He doesn't speak. He just watches as I step over the threshold. The door clicks shut behind me. And I know, deep in my gut, I've made a mistake. The air inside the room is different from the rest of the house. Warmer, thicker. A strange mix of perfume and smoke and something else. Something sharp, almost metallic. The lighting is dim, casting deep shadows that stretch across the plush carpet. There's music here too, but it's softer, more intimate. A slow, rhythmic beat. The room isn't empty. Girls are sitting on a long, low couch, their dresses too short, their eyes too tired. Some look younger than me, some older. All of them are beautiful in a way that feels rehearsed, perfected, as if they've been sculpted to fit a mold. There are men too. Not many, just a few. Sitting, watching, waiting. And then I see him. He's sitting in the center of the room, sprawled back in his chair like a king surveying his kingdom. A drink in one hand, a lazy smile curling at the edges of his mouth. His eyes are dark, unreadable. He doesn't speak, doesn't gesture. He doesn't have to. The room already belongs to him. A man steps forward, holding out a glass. I don't reach for it, but he doesn't lower his hand. I glance around, searching for something, someone, a way out, a familiar face. But there's nothing, only the waiting. I take the glass. The liquid inside is golden, thick. It smells strong, but sweet. Someone murmurs something. I don't catch the words, but I understand them anyway. Just drink. So I do. The warmth starts in my stomach. It spreads fast, too fast, rushing through my veins like wildfire. My fingers tingle, my head feels light, the walls shift, the shadows stretching, twisting. I try to speak, but my tongue is heavy, my lips are slow. The voices around me start to blur, turning to murmurs, laughter. The music pulses. My vision swims. The room tilts. Hands on my shoulders. Hands on my waist. Laugh. Someone whispers, "She's ready now." And then I look up. The ceiling is mirrored, and in it I see myself. Small, helpless. eyes wide with terror, lips parted in a silent, desperate no. And then, nothing. Darkness swallows everything. Chapter 3. The Black Door. The darkness doesn't just take me, it drowns me. I don't remember hitting the ground. There's no sensation of falling, no sudden impact, just the feeling of slipping into something vast and endless, a weightless drift through nothingness. The silence is thick, pressing against my ears, wrapping around my throat. I can't breathe, but I don't think I need to. There's no air here, there's no body, no shape, nothing. And then, like a crack splitting through glass, the nothingness shatters. Light floods my vision, but it isn't warm. It's cold, sterile, stretching out endlessly in all directions. I'm standing now, somehow, somewhere. The ground beneath my feet is solid, but smooth, unnatural. It reflects the dim glow of the world around me, like polished marble. But when I look down, there's no reflection. The cold room is gone. So is the party, the penthouse, the music, the laughter. I am somewhere else entirely. A hallway stretches before me, impossibly long, lined with doors on either side, each one identical, tall, wooden, with ornate gold handles. The air is thick with something heavy, something unseen, something watching. I feel it pressing against my skin, curling around my ankles like a tide ready to pull me under. I don't want to move, but I do. My footsteps make no sound as I walk. The doors tower over me, their surfaces smooth, untouched. I don't know where they lead. I don't know if I want to know. But something in me understands. Each door holds something, a truth, a memory, a piece of something they never wanted me to see. I walk past the first, then the second, then the third. Each time, I feel a pull, like invisible fingers tugging at my ribs. But I don't stop. My breath is shallow, barely there. The hallway stretches on, endless, infinite. And then I see it, the black door. It doesn't look like the others. It doesn't belong here. The wood is charred, split down the middle like it's been struck by lightning. Faint embers still glow along its edges, pulsing with an unnatural rhythm, like a heartbeat. The handle isn't gold like the others. It's iron, rusted, and covered in something dark. Something that looks too much like dried blood. A whisper seeped through the cracks. Not words, not a voice, just a sound. Faint, beckoning. I don't want to go near it. I don't want to know what's inside. But my feet keep moving. The closer I get, the heavier the air becomes. It's thick now, choking, pressing against my ribs. My fingers tremble as I reach out. The iron handle is freezing, biting into my skin like frost. The whispering grows louder, twisting around my ears, seeping into my skull. I turn the handle. The door swings open, and I step inside. The air changes the second I cross the threshold. It's no longer thick with unseen weight. It's humid, suffocating, filled with the stench of sweat, smoke, something rotting beneath it all. The light is dim, flickering, casting long shadows against damp stone walls. The floor beneath me is rough, uneven, covered in dust and something else, something sticky. A basement, a dungeon, a place that was never meant to be found. The room stretches out before me, lined with metal bars, cages pressed into the walls like cells. Chains hang from the ceiling, some rusted, some still gleaming under the weak light. A single bulb swings overhead, casting a slow, rhythmic glow. And then I see them. The girls. They are everywhere. Some sitting against the walls, legs pulled to their chests, arms wrapped around themselves. Others standing in the far corners, their faces turned away, hidden in shadows. Their dresses are torn, their hair tangled, their skin bruised. But it's their eyes that unsettle me the most. Hollow, empty, like something inside them has already left. I take a step forward, and one of them turns her head. Her neck moves too slowly, like it takes effort just to acknowledge my presence. Her lips are cracked, parted, but she doesn't speak. She just stares. Recognition slams into me like a fist. I know her. I don't remember her name, but I know her face. She was at the party. She was just like me, but she never left. A shiver crawls down my spine, but I can't move. The air is too thick, the weight of the room pressing against my shoulders. And then I hear it, the shuffle of footsteps, the low murmur of voices. Not the girls, someone else, something else. I turn, heart pounding. The shadowy figures emerge from the far end of the room, stepping into the dim light. Their faces are obscured, blurred at the edges like smudged ink. Their suits are crisp, expensive, untouched by the filth of the dungeon. They walk slowly, deliberately, hands in their pockets, their movements unhurried. They are watching, observing, waiting. One of them turns his head slightly, and even though I can't see his face, I know he's looking at me. I know he sees me. A cold dread spreads through my stomach, twisting into something sharp. I take a step back and my heel catches on something. A chain, rusted, slick with something wet. My breath hitches. The girls don't react. They don't flinch. They don't even wink. And I realize, with a sickening jolt, that some of them aren't alive. Some of them are barely more than shadows, their edges blurred, their bodies flickering in and out of focus, like echoes, like remnants of something that was here once but isn't anymore, and maybe never was. The figures in suits don't speak. They don't need to. Their presence alone is enough. A silent reminder. A warning. This is what happens to girls who don't leave when they're told to. This is what happens to girls who don't obey. I shouldn't be here. I need to leave. I turn, ready to run, but the moment I do, the room shifts. The walls stretch, the ceiling warps, the air thickens until it's like I'm moving through tar. My limbs are heavy, my vision blurs. The whispers return, slithering through my ears, curling around my throat. The figures don't move. They don't have to, because the room itself is holding me in place. I choke on a breath, gasping, clawing at my chest. The light flickers once, twice, and then everything goes black. Chapter 4. The Other Girls. The darkness doesn't feel like it ends. It stretches on forever, swallowing everything, pulling me into its depths. I don't know if I'm falling or floating. My body isn't my own. It feels weightless, detached, as if I no longer belong to it. There's no gravity, no up or down, only the overwhelming feeling of sinking deeper and deeper into something I don't understand. But the silence is worse. It's not empty. At first, I think it is. There's nothing but the sound of my own breath, shallow and uneven. But then, beneath it, something stirs. A whisper, faint and fleeting, then another, and another. A chorus of voices, hushed and distant, slithering through the void. I can't make out the words, but the tone is unmistakable. Fear. They are afraid. And then I see them. Shapes materialize in the blackness, shifting shadows forming into figures. They don't appear all at once. It's slow, like fog rolling in, curling around my limbs, wrapping itself around my throat. At first, they are just outlines, blurred and indistinct, flickering like candlelight. Then, they sharpen. Girl, dozens of them, standing in the darkness, their feet barely touching the ground. Their dresses are torn, their hair matted, their eyes. I don't want to look at their eyes, but I do. They are empty, hollow. Some are wide and staring, frozen in a silent scream. Others are downcast, vacant, as if they have already seen too much, as if they have already given up. Their bodies waver, flickering like images on a broken screen, phasing in and out of focus. Some of them are whole, their pale skin marred with bruises and marks I don't want to recognize. Others are only pieces, disjointed limbs, half-formed torsos, faces that fade in and out like they're struggling to exist. I open my mouth to speak, but my throat locks. One of them steps forward. She moves slowly, hesitantly, like it takes effort just to lift her feet. Her arms hang at her sides, her fingers curled inward, her nails broken. The dress she's wearing is white, but stained with something dark, something dry. I know her. I don't remember how, but I do. Maybe from the party, maybe from before, maybe from somewhere else entirely. She stops a few feet from me, her head tilting slightly, her lips parting. Her voice is a whisper, but I feel it sinking into my skin, sliding down my spine. We never left. A shudder ripples through my body, a slow, creeping cold that settles deep in my bones. I want to step back, to turn away, but my feet won't move. Another girl moves beside her. She's younger, too young. Her hair is tangled, falling over her shoulders in messy clumps. Her arms are wrapped around herself, thin, fragile. She doesn't speak, but I hear her anyway. Neither will you. The words sink in like ice. The whispers swell around me, overlapping, filling the void, wrapping around my ears like invisible hands. They don't let us leave. We belong to them. Even in death, we are theirs. A sudden weight presses against my chest, crushing the air from my lungs. My pulse pounds against my ribs, erratic and frantic. My vision blurs. No, it's not true. I got out. I escaped. Didn't I? The darkness shifts, the air thickens, the voices falter, their whispers curling away like smoke. And then, laugh. Deep, low, slow. It starts as a quiet chuckle, barely audible, a vibration more than a sound. But it grows. Louder, richer, closer. The shadows stretch, pulling inward, shifting, warping. The girls recoil, their flickering bodies trembling, their whispers cutting off. They shrink back, dissolving into the darkness, vanishing one by one, until I'm alone. But I'm not alone. I feel him before I see him. A presence. Something heavy. Something watching. I don't want to turn around. Every muscle in my body locks, a primal fear clawing up my spine, screaming at me to run, to hide. But there's nowhere to go. The laughter grows, low and amused, like a predator toying with its prey. I told, and he's there. Not completely, not yet. His form is a shifting thing, crawling in and out of focus, bleeding into the darkness. He is both there and not there, a shape without substance, a shadow without a source. He doesn't walk, he glides, the space around him bending, warping, caving inward under his presence. I can't see his face, but I know it's him. It's always been him. He moves closer, and for the first time, I understand the whispers. He is watching. He is always watching. My breath comes in short, sharp gasps. The space around me tightens, pressing in from all sides, forcing me to stay still. His presence is overwhelming, suffocating. The girls were right. I never left. I was never supposed to. And now, neither will I. Chapter 5. A quiet threat in the dead of night. I knew something was wrong before I even reached my front door. It wasn't anything obvious, not at first. Just a feeling, a wrongness in the air, something pressing against the edges of my senses like a whisper I couldn't quite hear. The hallway leading up to my apartment was too still, the usual flickering of the overhead lights absent, leaving the air thick with an unnatural silence. I slowed my steps as I got closer, my breath steady but shallow. My door looked the same as I had left it. No scratches, no dents, no sign of forced entry. But as I reached for the handle, a cold weight settled in my stomach. It was already unlocked. I stood there for a long moment, my fingers hovering just above the metal. I didn't move, didn't breathe. I had locked it, I was sure of it. I had double-checked before leaving, just like I always did. My pulse thumped against my ribs, sharp and insistent. I had two choices. I could walk away, turn around, get in my car and drive where, I didn't know. But I could leave. Or I could go inside. I wasn't armed. I wasn't expecting a fight. But if someone was still in there, waiting, then I had already lost. I pushed the door open. The lights didn't turn on. I flicked the switch twice, but nothing happened. I stepped inside cautiously, my hands skimming along the wall as I moved forward, my eyes adjusting to the darkness. The apartment smelled different. Stale air, dust disturbed, something slightly metallic underneath it all. I reached for my phone to use the flashlight, but when I pulled it out, the screen was black. I tried to turn it on, but it was dead. I hadn't let the battery die, I knew that for a fact. A quiet dread began clawing at the back of my mind as I took another step forward. My foot hit something on the floor. I crouched down and ran my hand over it. Papers scattered across the carpet. My eyes adjusted enough to make out the shapes of my furniture. The place was torn apart. Someone had gone through everything. Drawers were pulled out, their contents dumped carelessly onto the ground. Cushions slashed open, the stuffing spilling out like gutted insides. My desk was flipped, the chair on its side. I swallowed hard, moving through the wreckage slowly. No one was here now, I was sure of that much. But whoever had done this hadn't just been looking for something. They had left a message. I stepped into the kitchen. That's when I saw it. A single piece of paper sitting on the counter. No envelope, no signature, just 4 words written in thick, uneven ink. Walk away. My fingers curled into fists. I stared at the note, willing it to make sense. I had expected something like this eventually. I had known from the moment I started pulling at these threads that someone would notice. But that didn't make it any less real. A quiet threat. That's what this was. Not an open attack. Not a gun to my head or a shadow in the night. Just a warning. They want me dead. Not yet. They wanted me scared. I picked up the note, running my thumb over the edge. The ink was slightly smudged. Handwritten. That meant whoever had left it wasn't some distant entity pulling strings from behind a desk. They had been here. They had stood in this very room, close enough to reach out and touch my things, to tear through my life with their bare hands. I turned back toward the wreckage, scanning the room again. My laptop was gone. The hard drive where I kept my backups. Gone. All my notes, the physical copies, the files I had printed out for safekeeping, all gone. Every trace of what I had been looking into had been removed. They hadn't just come to scare me. They had come to erase what I knew. But they had made a mistake. Because I still remembered. I knew the names. I knew the flights, the connections, the whispers that had trailed behind them like shadows. They could take my files. They could delete my evidence, but they couldn't wipe my mind clean. I inhaled slowly through my nose, steadying myself. This wasn't the kind of fight I had been prepared for. I wasn't a journalist or a whistleblower. I wasn't some righteous crusader looking to burn down an empire. But now, it didn't matter what I had planned. They had made this personal. I took another look around, forcing myself to think. The security cameras in the building were useless, I already knew that. The landlord never bothered fixing them. There would be no footage, no blurry images of the intruders leaving with my things. But someone had to have seen something. I grabbed my keys and stepped back out into the hallway, making my way to the only neighbor who ever seemed to notice anything. Mrs. Alvarez had lived in this building for 30 years. She spent most of her evenings sitting by her window, watching the street below like it was her personal television. If someone had been coming in or out of my apartment while I was gone, she would know. I knocked twice. There was a shuffling noise behind the door before it creaked open just enough for her to peer out. Her face was lined with age, her eyes sharp despite the tired weight behind them. She frowned when she saw me. "They were in your place," she said, before I could even ask. My stomach tightened. "When?" "Couple hours ago," she said, voice low. "3 men. Didn't look like cops. Didn't look like movers." I kept my face still, my pulse picking up. "What did they look like?" She squinted slightly, thinking. "One of them was tall, real broad. Other 2 were smaller, but they moved like they knew what they were doing." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Didn't seem like a random break-in, if that's what you're hoping." I exhaled through my nose. Of course it wasn't. "They take anything?" she asked, eyeing me closely. "Yeah," I said, "but nothing worth money." That seemed to confirm whatever suspicion she had. She gave a slow nod. "You in trouble?" I hesitated. "Not yet." Her expression darkened. "If you got smart, you'd leave before you are." I had nothing to say to that. I thanked her and turned away, heading back to my ruined apartment, my mind racing. They weren't going to stop. Whoever they were, whatever they were trying to protect, it wasn't just about Diddy anymore. It wasn't just about him going down. This was bigger. And the list, the people on it, the ones who had been part of it all but had managed to stay hidden. Diddy had made mistakes. He had gotten reckless, let his arrogance make him sloppy. That's why he had been caught. But the ones who still had power, the ones who still had control, they weren't about to let someone like me pull them down with him. I looked down at the note again. Walk away. They expected me to. They expected me to be scared, to take this as my chance to back off before things got worse. But I wasn't scared. Not anymore. They had taken everything I had, but they had left me alive. And that was their second mistake. Chapter 6. The footage that changes everything. The first time I saw the video, it had already spread too far to be erased. I had been keeping my head down since the break-in, moving carefully, watching my back. Every night I checked my locks, twice, wedged a chair under the doorknob like that would stop anything, slept with my shoes by the bed in case I had to leave fast. But I still wasn't prepared for this. The video surfaced out of nowhere, first in whispers, then as a tidal wave that no one could contain. A short, grainy clip uploaded anonymously. No caption, no explanation, just a few seconds of footage that was never meant to see the light of day. I clicked the link and the screen flickered. The setting was familiar, a party but not the kind with velvet ropes and champagne glasses. This was the other kind, the kind that had always been whispered about but never confirmed, the kind that had ruined lives. The camera was shaky, but the scene was clear enough. The music was too loud, bass rattling through the speakers, making the screen vibrate slightly. The lighting was dim, but not enough to obscure the figures moving in the background. There was laughter, slurred words exchanged between bodies pressed together in the haze of alcohol, smoke, and something thicker, something heavier. And then the camera tilted, and there he was, Diddy, front and center, laughing, relaxed, completely at ease in the chaos around him. It wasn't old footage. You could tell by the way he looked. His hair, the lines on his face, the slight gray in his beard. This wasn't decades-old party footage from his heyday. This was recent. And he wasn't alone. Someone else was there with him. Someone famous? I felt my chest tighten. I replayed the clip, trying to convince myself I was seeing things, but there was no mistaking it. This wasn't some random hanger-on, some nameless person lost in the decadence. This was a name too big to ignore. A politician. Not just any politician. Someone still in power. someone whose entire career would burn to the ground if this video was real. I shut my laptop so hard it nearly cracked. My pulse hammered in my ears, my thoughts spiraled. Who leaked this? Why now? Was this a warning, a message, a trap? I tried to push those questions aside and focus on what mattered. This wasn't just about Diddy anymore. This was about everyone he had taken down with him. The media went into full-blown panic mode. Headlines flooded in within hours. Explosive new footage surfaces, Diddy linked to unnamed political figure. Alleged party video raises questions about high-profile attendees. Attorneys denounce leaked clip as AI-generated smear campaign. The spin machine moved fast. Diddy's legal team immediately claimed it was fake, AI-generated, a deep fake meant to smear his reputation. But that wasn't sticking. Too many people had seen it before the damage control kicked in. Too many had already recognized the location, the energy, the patterns. Then my phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. I hesitated. My instincts screamed at me not to answer. I answered anyway. "I saw it," I said before they could speak. A pause. Then the voice came through, quiet, rushed, scared. "There's more." I swallowed hard. My grip on the phone tightened. "I need to see it," I said. Another pause. "I don't think you do," they whispered. I closed my eyes, exhaling slowly. "Then why call me?" The line was quiet for a long moment. And then, because it's not just footage. A pit formed in my stomach. I turned toward the window, my eyes scanning the street outside my apartment, searching for shadows that weren't supposed to be there. "What does that mean?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. Another beat of silence, then, barely above a whisper, "It means the list wasn't the only thing he kept." My pulse kicked up. "How much are we talking?" A breath. Then a single flat statement. I stood there, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles ached. "You need to get out of there," they said suddenly, their voice sharper now, urgent. "If they know you've seen this, you won't have time to run." I was already moving, already grabbing my bag, throwing on my jacket. "Where?" I asked. Another pause. "Somewhere without cameras," they whispered. "Somewhere they won't expect you to go." I glanced at the laptop still open on my desk. The video paused mid-frame, frozen in time like a loaded gun waiting to go off. I had spent years keeping my distance from this world. Now it had found me again, and I wasn't sure I was going to make it out this time. Chapter 7. The trial that was never meant to happen. The days leading up to the trial felt like waiting for an earthquake. You couldn't see it, couldn't hear it, but you could feel it coming, pressing down on the city, stretching itself through every conversation, every whispered warning. People were bracing for something, even if they didn't know what. Diddy's legal team had been playing defense for months, scrambling to patch the cracks forming in a dam that was never meant to hold. The leaks kept coming, the stories kept spreading, and now, with the footage out in the open, the trial wasn't just about him anymore. It was about all of them. The government knew what was at stake. The industry was in panic mode. And then, witnesses started disappearing. It wasn't subtle, it wasn't quiet. At first it was small things. People missing depositions, lawyers issuing statements that their clients were reconsidering participation. The kind of soft pullbacks that happen when fear settles in, when the price of speaking out outweighs the relief of telling the truth. Then it got worse. One of the key witnesses, an ex-employee who had promised under oath to testify, was suddenly nowhere to be found. Her family reported her missing. She had left her apartment as usual, but never showed up to work. Her phone went dead. No goodbye texts, no withdrawals from her bank account. Just gone. The news barely covered it, just a small headline buried under the latest political nonsense. No connection to the trial was ever made publicly, and yet people in the industry knew. Her silence spoke louder than anything she could have said in court. One by one, other witnesses followed suit. Some recanted their stories completely, issuing legal statements saying they had misremembered things or that lawyers had misrepresented their words. Some refused to go to court at all, and a few just vanished, like they had never existed in the first place. I wasn't shocked. I had seen what happened to people who knew too much. But I also knew that whoever was orchestrating this wasn't just covering for Diddy anymore. This was bigger than him, bigger than one man. The system itself was shaking, and someone somewhere was deciding who had to be cut loose before the whole thing came crashing down. I had been careful. I had kept my head down, stayed quiet, kept moving. But even then, I knew it was only a matter of time before they turned their eyes on me. I wasn't a witness. I wasn't a victim. But I was in the way. And when you get in the way of people like this, they give you one chance to move. That chance came in the form of a phone call. Not a threat. Not a warning. An offer. I knew it was coming before I even answered. The number was blocked. The voice was calm, professional, like this was just another business transaction. They weren't sloppy. They weren't emotional. This wasn't some last-ditch effort to scare me off. This was structured, planned, a process they had followed before. They laid it out plain and simple. You've done your part. We don't need you to continue this. If you stop now, you walk away clean. I didn't answer. I just let them talk. You have no legal obligation to testify. No subpoenas, no formal accusations. You're just an observer. So let it go. Let this trial happen the way it's supposed to. I forced my voice to stay steady. And if I don't? A small pause. Then, flatly, like they were reading off a script. Then we have a problem. I waited. You have people you care about. My chest tightened. Family, friends. You don't want them involved in something that has nothing to do with them. Think about them. A long silence. Then a final warning. The ones who take the deal always sleep better at night. The line went dead. I sat there for a long time, staring at the phone in my hands. They weren't bluffing. They weren't giving me a choice. And I didn't know what to do. There was no heroism in this. No righteous indignation. I wasn't a crusader. I wasn't a whistleblower. I was just a guy who had stumbled into something far bigger than himself, and now I had to decide if I was willing to take the fall for it. They knew how to make problems disappear. They had done it before, and if I didn't back off, I would be next. But if I took the deal, if I walked away just like they wanted, then they won. Diddy wasn't the real target here. He had been the face of it, the one reckless enough to get caught. But there were bigger players in this game, people who still had power, people who couldn't afford to be exposed. And the only thing standing between them and getting away with it all was the truth. I swallowed hard, my mind racing. They had already gotten to the witnesses. They had already silenced the ones who mattered. His trial. It was never meant to happen. And if it did, it would be on their terms. Not the courts. Not the public's. Not the victims. Theirs. The question wasn't whether or not justice would be served. The question was who would be sacrificed to make it look like it had been. And now I had to decide, would it be me? Or would I walk away just like they wanted? I took a slow breath, and for the first time since this started, I knew exactly what I had to do. But it wouldn't be easy, because if I chose to move forward, if I chose to expose what they were trying to erase, I might not make it out alive. Chapter 8. Diddy is gone, but the nightmare remains. The day of the trial arrived with an eerie sense of inevitability. The streets outside the courthouse were lined with reporters, their cameras fixed on the entrance, waiting for the moment that would define the collapse of an empire. Protesters stood in clusters, some holding signs demanding justice, others waving banners in blind support of a man they still believed was untouchable. But when the doors opened and the court officers began filing in, there was one glaring absence. Diddy wasn't there. At first, the speculation ran wild. Some said he had refused to leave his cell, that he had suffered a breakdown behind bars. Others whispered that he had struck some last-minute deal, that this was all part of a game being played at a level no one else could see. His lawyers issued a carefully crafted statement within the hour. Due to health concerns, Mr. Combs will not be appearing in person at today's proceedings. The court has been informed of his medical condition, and accommodations will be made accordingly. That was it. No specifics, no elaboration. Just a vague excuse designed to keep the press chasing its own tail. But I knew better. I had spent too long pulling at these threads, following the trail of names and faces that had hidden in the shadows for decades. I knew when something smelled rotten. This wasn't about health. This was protection. The people in power, the ones whose names had started surfacing in connection to him, weren't ready to let him take the stand. Not yet. Maybe not ever. And while the reporters scrambled to make sense of his absence, while his legal team maneuvered behind the scenes to keep him insulated, something else was happening in the background. The empire was crumbling. It started with the people who had once stood next to him, who had thrived under his shadow. The business partners, the investors, the so-called loyal allies who had smiled for cameras while the money poured in but were now distancing themselves as fast as they could. Companies quietly severed ties. Endorsements were pulled. Former friends and collaborators issued carefully worded statements condemning his alleged actions while making sure to remind the public that they had no prior knowledge of misconduct. One by one, the walls were closing in. But it wasn't just about money. The victims were speaking out. For years they had been silenced through fear, through coercion, through the overwhelming power of a machine that had been built to consume and discard people like them without consequence. But now, the floodgates had cracked. More women, more men, more stories. Some had been trapped in his orbit for years, unable to escape the gravitational pull of power and influence. Others had been on the outskirts, witnesses to the things they had been too afraid to acknowledge at the time. And now that he was falling, they weren't holding back anymore. I read through the statements as they emerged, one after another. Some were anonymous, others came with names attached. The details varied, but the patterns were the same. The parties, the islands, the promises made and the price paid in return. There had always been whispers about the ones who had disappeared, about the girls and boys who had entered those rooms and never truly left, even if they had walked out. But now those whispers were turning into evidence. It was harder to ignore when the victims weren't just faceless allegations, when the stories started connecting. And with each new testimony, the industry's worst-kept secrets were being dragged into the light. Names that had been protected for decades were now being spoken aloud. Producers, executives, celebrities who had smiled for cameras while knowing exactly what went on behind closed doors. And that was when the shift happened. Because this had never just been about Diddy. He had been a piece of the puzzle, sure, but he wasn't the whole picture. He was a product of a system that had allowed men like him to thrive unchecked for years. And now that the cracks were showing, now that the mask was slipping, the people who had enabled him weren't done fighting back. They weren't going to let this trial take them down with him. So they did what they did best. They controlled the narrative. They pushed stories out, one after another, filling the airwaves with just enough distractions to keep people from looking too closely. They spun conspiracy theories to discredit the victims, twisting their stories until the truth was tangled beyond recognition. They dug up dirt on the witnesses, painting them as unreliable, as opportunists looking for their 15 minutes of fame. They shifted the blame, rewriting history in real time, making sure that if anyone went down, it was only Diddy. Because as long as the world focused on him, they could keep the rest of their secrets buried. And the worst part, it was working. I could see it happening in real time, the way public opinion was already starting to fracture, the way the media was carefully steering the conversation away from the bigger picture. The machine wasn't just fighting back. It was winning. And me? I had a choice to make. I could keep fighting, keep pushing, keep risking everything to make sure this story didn't disappear into the abyss like so many others before it. Or I could do what they wanted. I could walk away. I could pretend none of this ever happened. That the list never existed. That the missing weren't still missing. That the people trapped in this nightmare weren't still out there, waiting for justice that would never come. I sat in the darkness of my apartment, the glow of the laptop screen casting sharp shadows across my face. The weight of everything pressed down on me, a cold, relentless pressure that refused to let go. I thought about the threats, the warnings, the way the world had tried to convince me that this fight was already over. But it wasn't. Not yet. Because Diddy might be gone, but the nightmare wasn't. The system was still standing, and as long as it was still standing, people like him would rise again. They would rebuild, rebrand, shift the blame onto someone else. They would keep repeating the cycle unless someone did something to break it. I took a deep breath. I knew what I had to do. I wasn't walking away. Not this time. Not while the truth was still waiting to be told. Not while they still thought they could bury it. I reached for my phone, and I started making calls. Because if they wanted to burn this story down, I was going to make sure I set fire to everything they were trying to protect.